A billionaire CEO watches in horror as his 9-year-old disabled son asks a hotel worker to dance at an elite charity gala. The entire ballroom goes silent. Whispers start. His face burns with embarrassment. Henry Whitmore built a tech empire worth billions, but he can't fix his son Ethan's cerebral palsy. At the Whitmore Foundation Gala, surrounded by New York's elite, Ethan rolls his walker toward Maria, a simple woman clearing dishes, and asks the unthinkable. As 200 of the city's most powerful people stare, Henry's reputation hangs in the balance. He signals his son to stop, ready to apologize to the worker and salvage the situation. But Maria does something that will shatter everything Henry believes about success, power, and what his son truly needs. She slowly removes her serving gloves, curtsies like a princess, and says 5 words that will change a billionaire's life forever. What happens next will make you question everything you think you know about strength, leadership, and the power of letting go. What did Maria say? And how did one dance transform a father's entire world? You won't believe what comes next. The ballroom glittered. Tall windows showed the lights of New York City far below. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks, casting a warm glow on men in dark suits and women in sparkling dresses. Music, soft and smooth, floated through the air. Waiters moved quietly, offering drinks and small, fancy foods. This was the annual Whitmore Foundation Gala, a night for rich people to give money to good causes. Maria Sanchez moved among them, but she was not one of them. She wore a simple black uniform, the kind the hotel staff wore. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly. She worked part-time at the hotel, clearing empty glasses and used plates. Most guests didn't seem to see her at all. She was just part of the background, like the wallpaper or the music. Near a big window, a young boy named Ethan Whitmore sat in a special chair. He was 9 years old and had a bright, curious face. A metal walker stood beside him. Ethan had cerebral palsy, which made it hard for his muscles to work together. His father, Henry Whitmore, stood nearby. Mr. Whitmore was a tall man, the boss of a big company called Whitmore Technologies. He looked important and a little serious, even when he smiled. Ethan watched Maria as she worked. She had a kind face. When she passed near him, Ethan's voice, a little soft, called out, "Excuse me." Maria stopped and turned. "Yes," she asked, her voice gentle. Would you like to dance with me?" Ethan asked. He looked up at her, his eyes hopeful. The soft music seemed to pause. The low hum of talk in the ballroom quieted. The only sound was the small click as Ethan pushed his walker a tiny bit forward on the shiny floor. A few people nearby turned to look. Maria could hear whispers. "How strange," one woman murmured to her friend. "Is that appropriate?" another asked, raising an eyebrow. Henry Whitmore's face turned a little red. He looked embarrassed. He gave a small, quick signal to Ethan, a little motion with his hand that meant, "Sit down, son." "Not now." He started to step forward, maybe to say sorry to Maria. But Maria was already looking at Ethan. She saw the hope in his eyes and the slight tremble in his hands as he held his walker. She slowly pulled off the thin white gloves she wore for serving. She gave a small, respectful bow, like a princess in a story. "I would be honored to dance with you," she said softly. She held out her hand. Ethan's face lit up. He carefully placed his small hand in hers. There were little gasps from some of the watching guests. Maria gently guided Ethan and his walker towards a more open space on the dance floor. She moved slowly, matching his steps. He would take a step, then pause, then another. Maria didn't rush him. She let him lead, his walker gliding on the smooth floor. It wasn't like the other dancing in the room, fast and fancy. Their dance was slow, a little wobbly, but it was real. It was a boy and a kind woman, sharing a moment. Henry Whitmore watched them. His face was a mix of feelings. A little bit of pride for his son's courage, but also that familiar sting of embarrassment, of wishing things were different, easier. He didn't know what to do, so he just stood there, watching his son dance. It's amazing, isn't it? How small acts of kindness can truly ripple out and touch so many lives. If you believe in the power of these simple moments to make a big difference, think about subscribing for more stories just like this one. Henry Whitmore stood near the wall, feeling out of place in his casual clothes, which still looked too expensive for this simple room. He watched his son. At first, Ethan moved slowly, his steps small and careful, his eyes mostly on his walker and the floor. Maria didn't push him. She just kept the music going, moving with the other children, her energy filling the room. Gradually, something began to change in Ethan. Maybe it was the music so lively and easy. Maybe it was seeing the other children all different, all moving in their own ways without any shame or fear. Maybe it was Maria's calm, encouraging smile. Slowly, Ethan started to lift his head a little more. His steps became a tiny bit bigger. He even tried a little sway from side to side with his walker. A few of the other children, sensing a new friend, moved a little closer. One boy, using two bright blue crutches, gave Ethan a friendly grin. A girl in a powered wheelchair zipped over and said, "Hi, I'm Lily." Ethan, surprised, mumbled a hi back. There was no pressure, no awkwardness. It was just kids being kids. Henry watched all of this, a strange feeling growing inside him. He was used to Ethan's therapy sessions. Those were full of serious-faced therapists, medical charts, and talk of range of motion and muscle strengthening. There were goals and targets. Here there was none of that. There were no therapists in white coats, no complicated equipment, no talk of what Ethan couldn't do. There was just Maria and the music and a feeling of trust. Trust in the children, trust in their bodies, trust in the simple joy of moving. Maria then started a sort of group dance. It wasn't a set routine. She would make a move, wave her arms, wiggle her shoulders, stomp her feet, and the children would try to copy her, each in their own way. If a child in a wheelchair couldn't stomp, they'd roll their wheels forward. If a child couldn't wave their arms high, they'd wave them low. Maria didn't correct anyone. She just smiled and mirrored their movements back, making everyone feel included, making every movement valid. And then Henry heard it. A sound he hadn't heard from Ethan in a very, very long time. Not since before the doctors had given them the diagnosis, before the endless appointments and worries had started. Ethan laughed. Not a small polite chuckle, but a real deep belly laugh. He was trying to copy a funny wiggle Maria did, and he almost lost his balance, but he caught himself and he just laughed, his face bright with pure, uncomplicated joy. For the first time since Ethan was a very small boy, Henry saw his son looking truly free, truly happy, without a shadow of his disability dimming his light. A lump formed in Henry's throat. He felt his eyes sting a little. This simple room, this simple woman had given his son something that all his money, all his connections, all the best doctors had not been able to give. Before he left that day, while Ethan was still happily moving with the other children, Henry quietly walked over to a small, cluttered desk in the corner. He took an envelope from his pocket, a plain white envelope with a significant amount of cash inside, something he'd brought just in case, and slipped it under a pile of papers. He didn't want thanks. He just wanted to help. As he and Ethan were leaving, Maria smiled at them both. "Come back anytime, Ethan," she said. "You too, Mr. Whitmore." She didn't mention the envelope. She didn't treat him any differently than she had before. She just smiled her calm, kind smile. Henry nodded, unable to say much. He was too busy thinking. Henry Whitmore did come back. At first, he told himself it was just for Ethan. He'd drop Ethan off at the community center on Saturdays, telling himself his son needed this outlet, this joy. But soon, Henry found himself staying. Not just for a few minutes, but for the whole hour then too. He stopped standing awkwardly by the door. He started to help Maria set up the few plastic chairs they had for parents or for when the kids needed a rest. He'd move a mat, or offer to carry in the small, old CD player they used for music. He didn't talk much at first, just watched. He watched Maria with the children, her endless patience, her ability to see the strength in each child, not their limits. He started talking to the other parents too. They were not the kind of people he usually met. They weren't CEOs or investors. They were bus drivers, shop assistants, nurses. They talked about everyday struggles, about finding the right school, about the high cost of medical equipment. And they talked about the center. He learned that the center was struggling. The faded paint and old equipment weren't just signs of character. They were signs of a lack of money. The roof leaked when it rained hard. making a corner of the dance floor unusable. The electricity bill was always a worry. The center ran mostly on Maria's energy and a few small local donations. It was always on the edge of not having enough to keep going. One day, Henry approached Maria after a class. "Miss Sanchez," he said, trying to sound businesslike, "I've been thinking. Whitmore Technologies has a foundation. We give out grants to community projects. I could easily arrange a substantial business grant for this center. To fix the roof, get new equipment, whatever you need." He thought she would be pleased, grateful. But Maria looked at him with that same calm, steady gaze. She shook her head gently. "Mr. Whitmore, that's very generous of you. Truly. But this center, it's not a business. And I don't want it to become one." Henry was confused. "But it would help. It would make things better, easier." "Maybe," Maria said. "But this isn't about charity, Mr. Whitmore. It's about community. We do this together. The parents help clean. Local shops sometimes give us snacks. We hold small bake sales. Small, yes, but it's ours. It's built on people helping people, not on one big check from outside." She smiled a little. "A new roof would be wonderful, but not if it changes what we are." Henry didn't understand. He was a man who solved problems with money, with decisive action, with control. Her refusal again made him feel unsure. Meanwhile, Ethan was changing. He seemed to stand a little taller each week. He was more confident. He started trying to take a few steps without holding onto his walker quite so tightly. Sometimes, when the music was especially lively, he would let go for a second or two, trying to balance, trying to dance on his own. He'd wobble, he'd stumble, but he'd laugh. Henry watched all this, and cracks began to appear in the solid wall of his certainty. Doubts started to creep in. Doubts about his way of parenting. Had he been too focused on fixing Ethan, on controlling his environment, on pushing for medical solutions? Doubts about his wealth. What was it good for, if it couldn't buy the simple joy he saw on his son's face in this rundown room? Doubts about his own need for control. Was Maria right? Was there a different way to lead, to help, that wasn't about being in charge? These thoughts were new and uncomfortable for Henry Whitmore. The community center decided to hold a small fundraiser. Not a fancy gala like Henry was used to, but a simple evening event in their small room. There would be coffee and cookies, and the children would show their families and friends what they had learned, what they could do. Maria had told Henry about it, inviting him to come, just as she invited all the parents. Henry decided he would attend quietly. A few days before the event, Ethan came to his father, his eyes shining with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Dad," he said, "I want to dance at the fundraiser. By myself." Henry felt a familiar surge of anxiety. Ethan alone on a small stage? What if he fell? What if he got scared? What if people judged him? "That's a big step, Ethan," Henry said carefully. "Are you sure? Maybe Maria can dance with you, or one of the other children." Ethan shook his head. "No, I want to do it myself." Later, Henry found Maria. "About Ethan performing," he began. "I'm a bit worried. Perhaps we could have his physical therapist work with him, prepare a very simple, safe routine, to make sure it goes smoothly." He wanted control. He wanted to manage the risk, to ensure success. Maria listened patiently. Then she said very firmly but still kindly, "Mr. Whitmore, Ethan wants to do this. He knows what he can do. The most important thing is that it's his dance. We need to let him lead. Let him decide how he wants to do it. Trust him." Henry argued a little more, suggested other ways, but Maria stood her ground. "Let him lead," she repeated. It was a gentle challenge to Henry's entire way of operating. He finally, reluctantly agreed, though his stomach was in knots. The night of the fundraiser arrived. The small room was packed. Parents, grandparents, siblings, and friends crowded onto the plastic chairs and stood along the walls. The air was warm and full of happy chatter. Henry found a seat in the back, trying to be inconspicuous. One by one, small groups of children performed. Some in wheelchairs did a synchronized routine. Some with walkers did a joyful, if wobbly, line dance. Each performance was met with loud, loving applause. Then Maria stepped forward. "And now," she announced, her voice full of pride, "we have a very special solo performance. Please welcome Ethan." A hush fell over the room. Henry felt his heart pound. Ethan walked slowly to the center of the small cleared space, using his walker. He looked so small, so vulnerable. He took a deep breath. The music started, a gentle, hopeful melody. Ethan began to dance. He moved his walker a step, then swayed. He lifted one hand, then the other. His movements were not always smooth. He wobbled. He looked unsure at times. But he kept going. And as he danced, something amazing happened. A look of pure concentration and joy spread across his face. He wasn't just going through motions. He was expressing something from deep inside. He was telling his own story with his body. He was glowing with pride. Henry watched, and the tears he had been holding back for years began to flow freely down his face. He wasn't embarrassed. He was overwhelmed. He saw not his son's disability, but his son's incredible spirit, his courage, his light. When the music ended, Ethan stood there a little breathless, a huge smile on his face. For a moment there was silence. Then the room erupted. People jumped to their feet, clapping, cheering, some wiping their own eyes. The applause was deafening, full of love and admiration. Henry clapped until his hands hurt, the sound a release for all the worry and fear he had carried for so long. In that moment he understood. Maria was right. Real strength wasn't about control. It was about letting go. It was about trusting. It was about letting Ethan lead. A few weeks after the fundraiser, things began to change for the little community center. One morning, Maria arrived to find a letter from the city. It said that an anonymous donor had given a very large sum of money to the Parks Department, specifically to build a brand new, fully accessible community arts center in their neighborhood. The old building was to be torn down, and a much larger, brighter, better equipped one would take its place. It would have a proper dance studio with a sprung floor, therapy rooms, and art space, everything they had ever dreamed of and more. Enough funds were even set aside to cover operating costs for several years. Maria was stunned, then overjoyed. The parents and children were ecstatic. Seemed like a miracle. A few days later, Henry Whitmore came to the center with Ethan, as he usually did on Saturdays. The old center was still operating while plans for the new one were being drawn up. Maria watched him as he helped Ethan out of the car. He looked calmer these days, less like a CEO and more like just a dad. After the class, when the other children had left, Maria approached Henry. She held a copy of the city's letter. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice gentle but direct. "This anonymous donor. It was you, wasn't it?" Henry looked down at the floor for a moment, then met her eyes. He gave a small, almost shy smile. "I just wanted to help," he said quietly. You showed me something important. I didn't want any credit. It's not about me." Maria nodded slowly. "Why hide, though? Why not let people thank you?" "Because," Henry said, thinking carefully, "this isn't about one person giving a gift. It's about what you've all built here. The spirit of this place. I just wanted to give that spirit a better home. A donor's name can sometimes change things, make it feel less like it belongs to everyone." He looked at her. "You taught me that community is more important than charity." Maria smiled. "Well, Mr. Whitmore, your secret is safe with me. But thank you. From all of us." Months passed. The old center was carefully emptied, memories packed away with the worn-out mats and the old CD player. Then the new center rose, bright and welcoming. It was everything they had hoped for and more. There was a big opening day celebration. The mayor came. There were balloons and music. Ethan, now standing even taller, more confident than ever, was chosen to help Maria cut the big red ribbon across the new entrance. He held the large scissors with her, his smile wide and proud. Henry Whitmore stood in the crowd, not on the stage, not near the front. He was just one of the many happy faces watching. He wore a simple jacket, no tie. He clapped along with everyone else. He wasn't Henry Whitmore, CEO. He was just Ethan's dad, part of the community. He watched his son beaming and felt a quiet, deep satisfaction. His wealth, for once, had been used not for show, not to control, but to help something beautiful grow quietly from the background. It was a new feeling for him, and it felt surprisingly good. Several more months went by. The new center was bustling with activity. Ethan continued to go to Maria's classes. He loved the new smooth floor of the dance studio. One afternoon during a class, the music was particularly lively. Ethan was moving, his walker nearby but not in his hands. He took a step, then another. He wobbled, he swayed, he almost stumbled once, but he caught himself, a huge grin on his face. He was dancing, truly dancing, without his walker. Not for a long time, just for a few precious moments, but he was doing it. Henry stood by the side, watching. His first instinct, the old instinct, was to rush forward to steady Ethan to prevent a fall. But he stopped himself. He saw the joy on Ethan's face, the determination. He saw Maria watching too, her expression calm and encouraging, ready to help if needed, but giving Ethan the space to try, to succeed, or even to fail and try again. Henry took a deep breath and simply watched, his heart swelling with a quiet pride that needed no announcement. Later, Maria stood beside Henry, looking out at the children. They weren't employer and part-time worker anymore. They weren't billionaire and simple woman. They were just two people who cared about these kids, standing together as equals. A week later, Henry was asked to say a few words at a small community gathering at the center. He wasn't there as the secret donor, but as Ethan's father, a parent who had seen the magic of the place. He stood up, not at a fancy podium but just among the chairs. "I used to think," Henry began, his voice thoughtful, "that leadership was about having all the answers, about guiding people down a path that I had chosen, about being in control." He paused, looking around at the faces in the room, at Maria, at Ethan. "But I've learned something here. I've learned that real leadership, the kind that truly empowers others, isn't about guiding them or controlling them. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is to step aside and let others find their own path, in their own way, at their own speed." He smiled. It's about giving them the space to lead themselves. As the gathering was ending and people were chatting and laughing, Ethan walked over to Maria. He was using his walker now for balance as he moved through the crowd, but his steps were confident. "Maria," he said, his voice clear, "may I have this dance?" Maria's eyes sparkled. She curtsied playfully. "I would be delighted, Ethan." He grinned and offered his hand. They moved to the center of the room. The music was soft, just background melodies. This time, as they danced their slow, gentle dance, there were no whispers, no stares of disapproval. Only smiles. Smiles from Henry, smiles from the other parents, smiles from the children. It was a dance that had come full circle, but everything had changed. It was a dance of acceptance, of joy, and of a quiet revolution that had started with one simple act of kindness. If you enjoyed this story of quiet strength and the beautiful ways people can change and grow, we think you'll love some of the other inspiring underdog stories we have. You can find a link to that playlist in the comments below. We hope they touch your heart just like this one did.